everyone gets a bit of grace. People do have bad days. So if we misword something here or there, it's probably okay. Not only that, but people actually like when people step up and take charge and lead. For those that are above you, it's actually a relief of the burden. You're taking it off their plate because you're taking ownership and leadership. People below you actually like to see that strength and they react to that in a positive way. The fear is usually unfounded because there's so many benefits to doing it. And if you word something wrong on a given day because you're getting back in the saddle and things are a little rough, it's probably not going to be so catastrophic as one might think.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script, but you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Jessy James, and today's guest is Nathan Ives. Nathan Ives is Executive Vice President of Business Development at DataGlance, where he advises senior executives on digital transformation and enterprise AI strategy. With more than 30 years of leadership experience across consulting, operations, and business development, Nathan helps organizations translate complex challenges into actionable technology-enabled solutions. Previously a practice leader at Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and Black & Veatch, he has guided large-scale system integrations, cybersecurity, risk management, and performance improvement initiatives across critical industries. A military veteran and nonprofit executive, Nathan brings disciplined strategy, operational insight, and forward-thinking AI innovation to every organization he serves. Nathan, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Jessy. I'm pleased to be able to join you.
Wonderful. Nathan, I'm curious, who is someone from your early life or even an early experience that you had that shaped the kind of leader that you are today?
Well, Jessy, I would point out two actually different individuals. As you mentioned, I'm a veteran. My career started out in the United States Navy. I was an officer on a submarine. And I had two mentors that really shaped my leadership style. The first was the executive officer. And Tom really had uncompromising standards. He expected high performance from everyone at all times and held himself accountable to those standards. And so that inspiration and the results that he was able to achieve really inspired me to adopt, again, those kind of uncompromising high standards, recognizing I needed to portray those myself and then inspire those in the others that I was leading. The other was our engineer. And so what Eric really tried to develop in his people, he didn't want you just to bring problems. He wanted you to bring solutions. But there's a little bit more. It wasn't a bring me a solution and let me decide. Bring me a couple of solutions and tell me what you're going to do. It wasn't even what you're going to recommend. So we would go to him, we'd present, here's our issue, here's say three ways to solve it, and this is what I intend to do. And Eric always left. There was a momentary pause. And if you were going to, break something, hurt yourself or others, he would stop you, of course. But sometimes it was a learning moment. Sometimes maybe you were going to go do something that wasn't the most optimal, but he was going to use that as a training moment. But what it did was it taught ownership, and it taught you to actually be able to stand up and take the lead. So you could be the leader. You weren't relying or deferring to somebody else and their judgment. You were being the leader that you were supposed to be as an officer and were to go do things. So it was a combination of again, our executive officer, our engineer, that really shaped the kind of leadership style that I like to think anyway that I embody today.
And that's where I want to go next, Nathan. So both these people, how have they influenced or shaped the kind of leader that you are today?
Yeah. Well, Jessy, to take an example. So we have project teams out in the field. As you mentioned in my biography, I do deal with a lot of implementations of technology solutions. In my past, I might be the project manager. Now, as an executive, I just oversee the projects. What I find is, too often you might have developing project managers that want to rely on the executive to make a decision. So if a challenge comes up, maybe a customer wants something that's out of scope of the project, they always want to defer to the executive. You engage with the customer, you take on the problem. And I tell them, no, you're the project manager. This is your responsibility. When you have an issue that is an executive level issue, meaning the customer's executive is involved, now I'm going to get involved. And I have to keep driving that home. And what it does is it builds a sense of empowerment over time. At first it's very uncomfortable. You're pushing someone into a discomfort zone. They often defer because that's what they've always done. And I don't want to micromanage the project. I don't want to be the project manager. They're the project manager, I'm the executive. So by not just telling them to go do something, but reinforcing they have the authority to go to do this. It's their responsibility to do it. Mm-hmm. Then what I find is you do that for a little while, and all of a sudden something clicks. And now you stop getting these, will you do this? What should I do? Questions. Then you get into, again, what Eric taught me. Then you get the, hey, I'm giving you a report. We had this issue. Here were the three options. I'm going to go do this, or I did this other one because this is what our contract says, or this is what, our values, our approach has us do. And I did this, and this is the result I got. And so it really allows me to take, again, those things that shape me, and then I use those to shape my teams and how I want them to behave and respond.
Nathan, what does true leadership mean to you? What from your perspective, makes a true leader?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say that a true leader is someone who inspires others to do or to be more than what they thought they were capable of. I think that kind of misses the mark, though. We're not trying to inspire somebody to do busy work. It has to be toward an end or a goal. Typically, those ends require multiple people with multiple different skills and experiences to achieve a common goal. So the leader needs to develop and inspire people to do more than what they think they're capable of doing, but it needs to be in a way that's consistent with the organization's values, that has them working with others, and ultimately achieves a desired outcome. And so it has to have those caveats with it, besides just people achieving more than they thought was possible.
Yeah, I think you touched on this, but I'm curious, what difference does that make? I mean, why does it matter?
Well, and I've observed organizations and that don't necessarily have that outcome. Or the result focus. And what happens, think of it as a team, a crew team. We know they have to row in sync to maximize, the speed of the boat over the water. If I'm a leader, I might inspire one of these rowers, if that's the team I'm leading, to row harder, faster than they've ever done before. But if they're out of sync with the rest of the team, we're going to lose the race. It's not good enough for me to inspire people to exceed what they thought their boundaries were and to become more, but it's got to be more in a very directed or constructive fashion. Otherwise, it doesn't become meaningful. It's just more stuff. In my example with the crew team, it's people pulling to the right, to the left, and we get nowhere. And so a leader has to be deliberate in the destination that they're leading people to. We also, and I don't want to lose this, how we got the result matters. And I've mentioned the term values a few times. It does matter in how we get there. So it's not just a matter of I've inspired you to do more and hey, we got this great result. If we did it, and I'm not saying maybe anything would be illegal, but maybe we didn't do it in the most ethical manner, that in where I come from is not a desired outcome. How we did it is part of the result. And so if we did it in an ethical, professional way and we achieved our result, so it's a full package there.
Nathan, can you share a time when you realized that your way of leading or living no longer met the demands of your work and life and growth was needed?
Oh, well, yes. So Jessy, I think, sometimes we get in different roles or different situations. Perhaps, things, personal things in life intrude, and it becomes comfortable not to be the leader. It becomes comfortable to start deferring to others, especially if we're working with, say, a senior, and I argue even the CEO works for somebody. But the other somebody is willing to take charge. And I have found in my career, and I have to do resets from time to time, that, I just the body of things that I found myself dealing with, maybe I was feeling overwhelmed. Like I said, a person is not just their work life. You have your personal life. You mentioned I'm involved with, a not-for-profit. Sometimes things just collide and everybody wants things all at once. And I step back. And unfortunately, what happens is when you step back and you get comfortable, you stop growing. In fact, you stop leading. And if let go for long enough, what you then find is now you've lost that spark and you're not being aggressive. You're not seizing the leadership moment. You're not having the high standards. You're deferring. You're not just not coming up with, here's the answer to the problem. You're not saying, this is what I'm going to go do and seizing the moment and go do it. So I've had those times in life. Like I said, usually it's you have some personal things that start impacting. And so now in the business world or in the not-for-profit world, you tend to deferring. So.
And I'm also curious, what did you have to outgrow or let go in this process?
Yeah, Jessy, I am a huge proponent of coaches and mentors. And in my case, and I've done this throughout my entire career, I always have a coach and mentors. And so I had to turn to a coach in my case because I lost the edge. And what the coach in this case did was help me create a path to recapture the edge, to sharpen the sword and get back in the saddle, and to be willing to step forth and take charge. Because after you go for so long, you start to become hesitant. You start viewing yourself as maybe others now start viewing you as not the leader, not the one to take charge. And then you become hesitant and you're hesitant to try to jump back into that. And what will people think? And so I have used coaching and coaches to help me then overcome those mental blocks, put together a plan. What does overcoming this mean in action? How does one speak? And work toward those recapture. The other part with a coach and a mentor is that they also are an accountability partner.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have an accountability partner. You can have an accountability partner. They can be a friend, they can be a spouse, or you're a coach, but you have to let somebody else know of the journey and the milestones that you're going to achieve and the commitment you have to achieve them by a date. It's important to set the date. And so I would do weekly check-ins with my coach as also an accountability partner to make sure I was faithfully executing as I said I would. And then over a period of time, the sword gets sharpened, and now, okay, now we're back. We're beyond the struggle, like I said, the personal intrusion in my case, and we're sharpened the sword. We're back to being the kind of leader that we once were and we aspire to continue to be.
And Nathan, if I could just take this conversation a little bit further, and I think you touched on it, but I'd love to bring it out a bit more, is, as you got to work with your coach and got the accountability bit going,
Mm-hmm.
what did you have to outgrow and let go or grow beyond to kind of really get into that driver's seat and take on that accountability, right?
Jessy, that's a great question. And the thing that concerned me the most, I'd actually pulled back into a place of fear. Fear of, if I'm now assertive, I'm going to, ultimately the ultimate fear, I'm going to lose my job.
Mm.
I'm going to lose my income. I've spent 30 years of my life trying to, create a life. I'm looking forward, I'm not necessarily close to retirement, but some of that build was for retirement or for a lifestyle. I'm an empty nester now, starting to enjoy some of these years. And so I was very much afraid that, if I say the wrong thing or at the wrong time, I'm just going to be out of a job. And then if I'm out of a job, how hard is it going to be for me to get another job? This time frame, just to maybe bound that too, it was during the COVID period, the 2020, 2021, 22 period. And so, people weren't necessarily getting out like they were. So all of a sudden, when you normally think, hey, I have connections and a professional network and the like, people were losing touch because we weren't regularly meeting at, off-sites and conventions and things of that sort where we kept in touch over the years. And so now it starts to become even more unsettling because, well, hey, if I lose my position here, how hard is it going to be for me to find something elsewhere? And the economy wasn't doing so well either. Now, what I came to learn, of course, through the coaching, if you're a top performer, you really don't have the fear. Everyone gets a bit of grace. People do have bad days, so if we misword something here or there, it's probably okay. Not only that, but people actually like when people step up and take charge and lead. For those that are above you, it's actually a relief of the burden.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking it off their plate because you're taking ownership and leadership for this item. People below you actually like to see that strength and they react to that in a positive way. So, you got to get over, the fear is usually unfounded because there's so many benefits to doing it. And yeah, heck, if you word something wrong on a given day because you're getting back in the saddle and things are a little rough, it's probably not going to be so catastrophic as one one might think. And I had to have my coach help me, work through that because I was just concerned about, oh, hey, I misphrase anything. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about your journey over the past few years, what's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself for your own growth?
Again, it gets back to the coaches and the mentors. The coaches, in fact, I have paid for coaching. Throughout my career, I have done that. So, at some organizations I've been at, there's been formal coaching programs that the organization provides. Some organizations don't provide training and coaching, and so I find it so valuable. I will write the check, and they're not small. I have made very sizable investments, and when I say I hire a coach, the coaching I've hired can be a year, can be multi-year, so it's an ongoing investment. Now, mentors, I find those mentors in an organization, and I do something also maybe a little different. I do peer mentors.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll not just look for senior folks within an organization, but I will look for peers to provide mentoring. And in that case, sometimes that peer mentoring isn't even within my organization. It's someone who has, again, kind of my role, but in a different organization. And again, we meet periodically and we go back and forth. In the case of a peer mentor, we actually kind of mentor each other and are a good sounding board that way. But those have been, I think, very key throughout my career, and I've always had them.
And Nathan, I'm curious, what difference has that made, in your leadership and in your life?
Mm-hmm. So again, I think in a lot of times, if especially you're coming into a unique situation, we talked about the one where I got overwhelmed and lost the edge. But then there's also those times where I'm into a unique situation, and so sometimes a coach has been able to provide a formula that I then can systematically think about a situation. The other thing they've helped me do is to pull back in a way. Sometimes we get emotionally tied to a situation or a course of action. And again, it's the coaches often bring a system, a framework in which to evaluate objectively the situation and to be able to move forward from there. And again, it gets back. We talked earlier. You have a problem, a solution, and I'm going to execute a course of action, and I'd have to do it at a high standard because the coach has provided the framework. Now I can do the evaluation, come up with a set of objective courses of action that I can now pick, and I can lead through that. So I'm leveraging that framework back into my leadership style and the way I like to be. Whereas without the framework, I just didn't have the ability to objectively evaluate what are the courses of actions and what should I do. I may have had overwhelming bias to doing the wrong thing, or just be totally lost altogether.
What's your vision for your leadership, your legacy, or the impact that you want to have in the years ahead?
Yeah. And Jessy, I've done this at every place I work at. So when I leave an organization, it's a couple things. I like to be able to objectively point at things in the organization and say, I left the organization better than what it was when I joined. So I have utterly failed if there hasn't been some positive change. And the positive change would be defined in the terms the organization defines, whether that's a value, their mission, or their business objectives. But more than just it has to, at that instance, it has to be able to sustain it. In other words, I haven't done my job as a leader if I haven't, led and developed people that when I leave, that that positive impact isn't sustained and sustained in the long term. And so often I find, and I interact with folks, and they did all these great things and then they left and it fell apart. I don't consider that to be great leadership. Great leadership, we actually developed something, but we developed the people. We led the folks, they were developed. Maybe we had to develop some systems and processes to go with it, but there's a sustained benefit. And ultimately, what makes me most proud of a legacy is not just when I see, oh, there was growth and now it's sustained. I don't want it to be flatlined. It was the sustained growth. That growth trajectory continues to improve and improve and improve over time, like the snowball rolling down the hill that gets bigger and bigger. That's what we want to see. And so I like to look back, and I can, and more so in some places than others, and I go, yeah, there was my legacy, and you can still see touches of it today, even though it might have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I can actually point to some things 20, 30 years ago and say, yep, yeah, here's something that's still this legacy artifact of when I was there. And believe it or not, folks are still doing it. Much better today than what they were back then, but still doing it.
Nathan, where do you feel most tested right now? Like what challenges are stretching you the most, both in leadership and in life?
I think right now, kind of the big challenge is really this disconnected business world we've lived in. There's something to be said about being together in person in an office. You learn from people when you're with them day to day. There's a knowledge transfer. There's leadership. It's easier to inspire people when you're there rather than when you have momentary Zoom type meetings. So the challenge I feel is this, again, this digital disconnect that we have. And it's whether it's business or it's the not-for-profit or even, in some cases in personal life, we're not as connected because we're not together. And I just see that as a challenge. It's far different, and I would say more difficult to lead through a camera on a computer screen than it is when you're there day to day. I talked about early on the executive officer who set the high standard but embodied that. I could not just be in a passageway and not see the man walking down the passageway and see the embodiment of that high standard, whether it was the way he carried himself, how he wore the uniform, how he interacted with people. It was ever present. And you just can't do that on a camera that you're on maybe a couple minutes a day, and then you have people that don't like to turn on the cameras, and so you're looking at an icon or their glossy picture on the screen. It becomes so much more difficult because you lose the richness that is just available with people being present, meaning together with one another.
Yeah. And Nathan, again, I'm curious. So what are the ways that you feel you need to grow most? What are the ways in which you need to grow and develop to meet this challenge?
Yeah, that is both a great question, and I don't know in this case if I have a great answer. It's one I'm continuing to explore. I have, in my current role, I'm one that picks up the phone. So when I get a question, let's go back to our project manager example. When the project manager sends me a question, I don't text back on Teams or send an email. I immediately, and I don't literally pick up the phone. I pick up a video conference call and I just immediately video conference them because it gives me the greater interaction. And so I'd like them to video conference me. I've got some of them are pretty good about it now. If they have a question or again something they need to talk about, they'll just video conference me, and some send me emails, and then they know they're getting a video call right back because I'm trying to bring us together, and it's because I think the interaction's important. So I guess for right now, the imperfect solution is I'm trying to maximize that FaceTime opportunity.
Got it.
And not leaning on the simple texts or emails that don't have the same conveyance. But I'm not convinced that's a perfect solution.
Are there ways that you feel you need to also grow personally, right? Beyond sort of the video conference and all of that to really be able to feel at peace with these changes?
I think for me personally, I am still, it gets back to sharpening the sword. Recently, I kind of did a personal inventory of, hey, am I behaving in the same manner that I'm asking my team to do? And this gets into, sometimes it's easy in a small company. Everyone picks up a little bit of everything. But a company doesn't run very well that way. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, I own business development. I am not a programmer. I'm not a technical person. If I were to jump into that arena, I'm either going to make a mistake, say something wrong, or it's going to take me 5 times longer to do than the other person. I'm not helping. So what I'm personally trying to grow, and I recognize, is we all have our role. And so we need to rely on one another, and we need to create boundaries. And again, leaders, I often find it hard to delegate. And I think in a small company where roles can be a little more fluid, it becomes even more difficult. But I'm trying to, around my people and around myself, define the clear boundaries of these are our responsibilities. And if someone needs help, we're going to find the right help. It's not just a free-for-all where whoever is available is going to jump in. So we need to have boundaries. And that's something I'm personally working on. No is an answer. We talk about, leading up. That's a common management or leadership phrase. Or people say no. You have to learn how to say no. You really do have to learn how to say no. And I think, for me personally, that's what I'm working on right now, is saying no. And just like I have my project managers, you're delivering project scope, and if the customer's trying to get out of scope, that's a change order. You're to manage the scope. We're not doing every little thing for them. I'm trying to instill that in our organization as well. We all do those things that we're responsible for, that we do well. And so that's what I'm personally working on right now, rather than trying to hop into leading everything.
Got it.
Yeah. We don't want to be over aggressive about that leadership role too. We have our area of responsibility. We shouldn't be taking it from somebody else. Yeah.
So this last question is more of an invitation to you. You have this time and space to share with our listeners anything that's top of the mind and heart for you. Take your time. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Well, and this gets back to the couple things that I was just talking about. I heard these things throughout my career: saying no and leading up. And if you would have asked me, years ago, this whole leading up, I would have told you a bunch of nonsense. People lead down, they don't lead up. No, you really do lead up. And sometimes leading up is the saying no. So, we as individuals and as leaders need to recognize our own boundaries. We get out of our wheelhouse. We can damage things. So, when I say, hey, if you want to be a leader, lead. Don't sit in the back of the room waiting for somebody else to volunteer. At the same time, we need to respect our capability. And organizations function best, teams function best, when we support somebody doing their own role. The quarterback throwing the ball in the football game does not then run down the field and catch it. And if we have a problem with the wide receiver, then that needs to be fixed. But it is not, having a lineman now getting all the passes. We have to do that in our own organizations. And so you have to learn how to say no. This is my wheelhouse, and I'm not going to be able to do this. And that in and of itself is, in large part, leading upwards. If we don't say no, then we will have leaders that assign the world, and the squeaky wheel will get the oil, and the squeaky wheel will have job assignments taken away from them, and then you, the performer, I want to be a leader, I'm doing everything. You're just going to get everything, but you're not going to be the leader. You have to embody that leadership, and leading up is literally leading up. It's saying, no, these are the boundaries, and honoring the boundaries. So that's something that I think for me in my career, I have taken forever and a day to learn. I was always the ultimate team player. I was doing all sorts of things hither and yon and everything. And I think that hurt. I think it hurt me as I got spread too thin. It had to be a defined box. That's not saying it can't be a big box. If you can, if you're a leader that can handle a big box, that's fine. But it has to be defined.
Nathan, I appreciate the wisdom that you've shared here today with me. I've gotten so much out of this conversation. There were so many interesting stories and nuggets there. And I'm sure that whoever's listening is going to benefit equally from whatever you've shared. So thank you once again for being on the True Leadership Podcast.
Jessy, thank you again for having me.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.